Imagine waking up in a country where every message you send, every purchase you make, and every opinion you share could be tracked, judged, or even punished. That's the fear spreading across the UK in 2025, as a wave of new laws begins to reshape daily life. From digital surveillance and AI-driven job cuts to restrictions on protests and media control, citizens are questioning how much freedom remains. These laws promise safety and progress, but many believe they come with a heavy price: the quiet erosion of privacy, expression, and individuality in a society under constant watch.
Number 1. The Digital Surveillance Expansion Act. The Digital Surveillance Expansion Act has become one of the most controversial laws introduced in the UK for 2025. It allows government agencies to use advanced AI monitoring systems capable of scanning online communications, social media posts, and even private messages for potential security threats. Supporters claim it strengthens national defense against cybercrime and terrorism, but many citizens see it as a direct attack on personal privacy. The technology behind this act is designed to detect keywords, emotional tones, and behavioral patterns, creating a digital profile for every user. While the government insists it is focused on safety, the blurred lines between protection and intrusion have sparked deep public concern. Critics argue that this law grants the state unprecedented access to private information, effectively making online anonymity impossible. Encrypted platforms like WhatsApp and Signal may be forced to share user data, undermining the very concept of end-to-end encryption. Cybersecurity experts warned that such mass surveillance could become a gateway for misuse, leading to unlawful targeting or data leaks. The potential for abuse grows when AI algorithms, which are not always accurate, flag innocent users as suspicious. Many fear this could normalize a society where every online action is monitored and recorded, eroding the sense of digital freedom that once defined open communication. From a broader perspective, the Act symbolizes a shift toward a surveillance-driven society, where safety is prioritized over privacy. Human rights groups have described the law as a step toward a digital authoritarian model, one that sets a dangerous precedent for other democratic nations. Citizens worry that their browsing habits, political opinions, and private conversations could now be stored indefinitely in government databases. This level of monitoring fosters a culture of fear, discouraging people from expressing themselves freely online. The debate continues to grow as experts question whether the cost of security is worth sacrificing the fundamental right to privacy, a value once seen as untouchable in the modern digital world.
Number 2. The Online Anonymity Restriction Bill. The Online Anonymity Restriction Bill has ignited widespread debate across the United Kingdom, primarily because it redefines the boundaries of digital identity and freedom of speech. The law requires every user on social media platforms, forums, and content-sharing sites to verify their real identity before creating or maintaining an account. The government justifies the move as a necessary step to combat cyberbullying, hate speech, and online harassment. It claims that holding people accountable for their words will lead to safer digital spaces. However, millions of citizens and digital rights advocates believe the bill represents a serious erosion of online privacy, turning the internet from a place of open dialogue into one of state-controlled identity verification. Critics fear that forcing real name verification will silence vulnerable groups, including whistleblowers, activists, and survivors of abuse, who rely on anonymity to share their experiences safely. By removing the veil of privacy, the law may expose individuals to harassment and retaliation, especially those speaking out against powerful institutions. Technology experts also highlight the cybersecurity risks involved, warning that storing such massive amounts of personal data could make users more vulnerable to identity theft and hacking. For content creators and journalists, anonymity has often served as a protective shield, allowing honest expression without fear of persecution. This bill, they argue, transforms that shield into a legal liability. The broader social concern is that the bill could reshape the entire digital culture in the UK. If every post, comment, or shared opinion is tied to a verified identity, users may self-censor to avoid potential backlash or government scrutiny. This shift could reduce the diversity of voices and perspectives that thrive online. While the intention to promote accountability is understandable, the result may be a quieter, less authentic digital world where people speak less out of fear of consequence rather than a sense of respect. Many now question whether the pursuit of online safety should come at the cost of freedom, expression, and personal security in the digital age.
Number 3. The Protest Regulation Amendment. The Protest Regulation Amendment has sparked a wave of anger and unease across the UK as it grants the police expanded powers to control public demonstrations. This law allows authorities to restrict or even ban protests that are deemed disruptive to daily life, infrastructure, or business operations. It broadens the definition of disruption to include excessive noise, blocked roads, or interference with public services, giving law enforcement wide discretion in deciding what qualifies as illegal activity. The government argues that these measures are meant to maintain public order and prevent chaos, especially after years of climate and political protests that disrupted transportation and city functions. Yet for many, this legislation feels like an attack on the fundamental right to peaceful assembly, a principle that has long been central to democracy. Civil rights groups have condemned the amendment for criminalizing peaceful activism, claiming that it allows the police to arrest citizens based on vague interpretations of disturbance. A protest could now be shut down simply because it inconveniences commuters or causes minor delays. This shift in legal power risks creating an environment where people fear exercising their voice in public spaces. Legal analysts warn that it blurs the line between maintaining order and suppressing dissent, especially when political motivations influence enforcement. The law's language gives the government an upper hand in deciding which causes deserve visibility, potentially silencing movements that challenge authority. This has raised alarms among unions, environmental groups, and social justice organizations who depend on protests to draw attention to urgent issues. Beyond the legal implications, the amendment threatens the social fabric of activism. Protests have historically been a catalyst for progress, from labor reforms to environmental action. Restricting them could weaken public participation and create growing resentment toward leadership. Citizens worry that democracy is being reshaped into compliance rather than collaboration. While order is essential, critics argue that true stability arises from dialogue, not suppression. The Protest Regulation Amendment has therefore become a symbol of a larger fear that the balance between security and freedom is tipping dangerously toward control. The law may protect peace on the streets, but it risks silencing the very voices that keep democracy alive.
Number 4. The AI Employment Integration Law. The AI Employment Integration Law has quickly become one of the most divisive pieces of legislation in the UK's 2025 policy landscape. This law encourages both public and private sectors to replace human labour with artificial intelligence systems in the name of efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Supporters argue it positions the UK as a global leader in automation, increasing productivity while reducing operational costs. However, millions of workers across multiple industries fear that it will lead to mass unemployment and social inequality. From retail clerks to customer service agents, many traditional roles are now being automated, and while companies celebrate higher profits, ordinary citizens are left wondering how to survive in a labour market that no longer values human effort. Economists warn that this transition could widen the gap between the wealthy and the working class, creating a society divided by access to technology. Those with advanced digital skills or experience in AI management will thrive, while others may struggle to find meaningful employment. The government promises reskilling programs and education initiatives, but critics question whether these efforts can truly keep up with the speed of automation. For many, the law represents a shift from human-centered labor toward machine-dominated economies, where decisions are made by algorithms rather than people. Ethical debates have also emerged, as AI systems lack empathy, emotional intelligence, and social awareness, qualities essential for roles in healthcare, education, and public service. The deeper fear is not just about losing jobs, but about losing purpose. Work has always provided more than income. It gives people identity, structure, and community. If machines begin to replace these roles, society could face a new crisis of meaning and belonging. Critics argue that without strong protections, the AI employment integration law might transform the workforce into a hierarchy where humans are overseen by technology rather than empowered by it. The promise of progress sounds appealing, but beneath that promise lies a troubling question. If machines become the primary workers, where does that leave the people who built the system? The law challenges the very idea of what it means to work, contribute, and matter in an increasingly automated world.
Number 5. The National Digital ID System. The National Digital ID System has emerged as one of the most controversial developments in the UK's legal framework for 2025. This law mandates that every citizen must possess a digital identity card linked to critical personal databases such as healthcare, taxation, education, and social benefits. The government promotes it as a revolutionary step toward modernization, claiming it will streamline bureaucratic processes, reduce fraud, and make access to public services faster and more efficient. On the surface, the concept appears practical and even progressive, offering the convenience of having all essential information accessible through a single, secure platform. Yet beneath the convenience lies a growing public fear that such integration could lead to unprecedented government surveillance and data control. Privacy advocates argue that once every personal record is centralized, it becomes far easier for the state to monitor, manipulate, or restrict individual freedoms. The database could theoretically track citizens' locations, financial transactions, and even health-related decisions, turning the ID into a tool of digital oversight. Cybersecurity experts also warn of the enormous risk that comes with storing vast quantities of sensitive data in one system. A single breach could expose millions of identities, potentially leading to financial fraud, blackmail, and identity theft on a national scale. Critics further point out that while the government emphasizes security, there are few guarantees that collected data will not be shared with private corporations or international agencies for profit or policy influence. Beyond the technical risks, the psychological impact of the law may be even more significant. Citizens worry that constant monitoring could erode the sense of autonomy and privacy that defines personal freedom. It raises moral questions about consent, transparency, and who truly owns personal data in the digital age. The National Digital ID System represents more than just administrative reform. It symbolizes a shift in power from the individual to the institution. Many fear that once such control is granted, reclaiming privacy will no longer be a right, but a privilege allowed by the state.
Number 6. The Immigration Control Reform Act. The Immigration Control Reform Act stands among the most hotly debated policies shaping the UK in 2025. This law introduces stricter biometric tracking, including facial recognition and fingerprint scanning at every point of entry. It also lowers asylum quotas and tightens visa requirements for foreign workers and students. Officials claim the legislation will enhance border efficiency, protect jobs for citizens, and strengthen national security. Yet many critics view it as a dramatic shift toward a closed border mentality, undermining the country's reputation as an open and diverse society. The law also grants immigration officers expanded powers to detain or deport individuals suspected of overstaying, often based on algorithmic assessments that may lack fairness and accuracy. Human rights organizations have raised serious concerns about the ethical implications of the policy. They argue that automated immigration systems risk reinforcing bias, particularly against people from certain ethnic backgrounds or developing countries. By depending on artificial intelligence for decision-making, the Act replaces human judgment with machine evaluation, which cannot account for complex humanitarian factors. Refugee advocates warn that the reduction in asylum approvals could leave countless displaced individuals stranded in unsafe conditions. Critics fear that this move not only violates international refugee protections, but also erodes the moral integrity of a nation that once prided itself on offering sanctuary. Reports have also surfaced of long processing delays, wrongful detentions, and misidentifications caused by technical glitches in biometric systems. The social impact of the Immigration Control Reform Act extends beyond policy. It affects the very identity of the United Kingdom. The country's cultural richness has long been rooted in diversity, but this legislation risks replacing inclusion with suspicion. Families are being separated, students are reconsidering studying abroad, and migrant communities feel increasingly unwelcome. Economists warn that such restrictive measures could harm industries reliant on foreign labour, from healthcare to agriculture. While the government argues it is safeguarding national interest, many fear it is sacrificing humanity for control. The question haunting many citizens is whether tighter borders will truly bring safety or simply create a nation defined by division, fear and isolation in a world that depends on global connection.
Number 7. The Financial Transparency Law. The Financial Transparency Law has unsettled both citizens and businesses across the UK, marking a new era of government oversight in personal and financial matters. This legislation requires that every bank transaction exceeding £500 be automatically reported to government authorities for review under anti-fraud and anti-money laundering initiatives. Officials argue that the system strengthens the economy by identifying illegal financial flows and improving tax compliance. On paper, this may appear to promote fairness and accountability, yet many people fear that it represents a direct invasion of financial privacy. The ability of the state to monitor everyday purchases or savings activities has left the public uneasy, with growing concerns that financial data could be misused for purposes unrelated to crime prevention. Critics argue that the law effectively criminalizes normal financial behavior, forcing honest citizens to feel constantly monitored. Small businesses are particularly worried about the burden of compliance, as they now must justify every transaction that crosses the reporting threshold. Economists warn that the law could discourage cash flow and consumer spending by making people afraid to move their money freely. Privacy advocates emphasize that financial information reveals intimate details about a person's lifestyle, beliefs, and relationships, details that should remain confidential unless genuine wrongdoing is suspected. The absence of strict data protection measures also raise fears of leaks or breaches that could expose sensitive information. The centralization of financial tracking systems means a single cyber attack could jeopardize millions of accounts simultaneously. Beyond its technical implications, the Financial Transparency Law raises deeper philosophical questions about freedom and autonomy. Many view it as part of a broader trend towards surveillance-based governance, where transparency is demanded from citizens but rarely practiced by institutions. The principle of financial independence is being challenged by the notion that every significant transaction must be explained and recorded. Citizens now question whether the fight against corruption should justify constant scrutiny of personal wealth and behavior. While combating financial crime remains essential, critics argue that true accountability must balance security with individual liberty. Without that balance, a law designed to protect the economy could ultimately erode public confidence and economic freedom instead. Number 8. The Climate Accountability Mandate. The Climate Accountability Mandate has become one of the most talked about and divisive environmental laws in the UK for 2025. Designed to reduce national carbon emissions, it introduces a personal carbon credit system where every citizen receives a fixed annual allowance for energy use, travel and consumption. Each flight, car journey and even household electricity bill deducts from this total. Once the limit is reached, individuals face higher taxes or are temporarily restricted from certain activities, such as booking flights or purchasing high-emission goods. Supporters argue that it is a bold and necessary step towards addressing the climate crisis, but opponents see it as government interference in private lifestyles. The idea of the state monitoring personal energy use feels less like environmental action and more like an intrusion into everyday life. Environmental economists acknowledge that while the mandate could significantly reduce emissions, it risks becoming a form of social control disguised as sustainability. Lower-income families may suffer most as they have fewer resources to buy additional credits or adopt greener technologies. Meanwhile, wealthier citizens could simply purchase extra allowances, turning environmental responsibility into a privilege rather than a shared duty. Critics argue that this creates a two-tiered system where the rich continue consuming while the poor are penalized for basic needs. There are also concerns about how the carbon credit data is stored, monitored, and enforced, as such systems require continuous tracking of citizens' consumption patterns through smart devices and online platforms. This could lead to an era of pervasive environmental surveillance where every action leaves a measurable carbon footprint linked directly to an individual's identity. Below the political and economic debates, the law touches a deeper emotional chord. Citizens increasingly feel that personal responsibility for climate change is being weaponized to shift blame away from major corporations and government inaction. While sustainability remains vital, many argue that real progress requires structural change rather than micromanaging citizens' daily choices. The climate accountability mandate may signal a greener future, but it also raises questions about freedom, fairness, and how far society is willing to go in the name of the planet. For millions, it embodies a growing fear that environmental policy could evolve into a new form of digital-era control.
Number 9. The Housing and Land Reform Act. The Housing and Land Reform Act has generated intense debate across the United Kingdom as it gives the government the authority to reclaim vacant or underused private properties for public housing projects. Officials defend the law by arguing that it addresses the growing housing crisis, offering affordable homes to families struggling with rising rent and property prices. The intention appears noble, aiming to reduce homelessness and make housing more accessible. However, many citizens view it as a direct threat to property rights, fearing that their land or unused buildings could be seized under vague definitions of underutilized. Critics warn that it could set a precedent where the boundary between private ownership and public necessity becomes dangerously blurred. Property owners and real estate investors have voiced concerns about the lack of fair compensation mechanisms outlined in the Act. The criteria for determining whether land is underused remain ambiguous, leaving space for political influence or misinterpretation. Small landlords, who depend on their properties as sources of income or retirement security, fear being unfairly targeted. Legal analysts highlight that while the government presents the policy as socially responsible, its implementation could border on compulsory acquisition, undermining confidence in the real estate market. Developers also caution that the increased uncertainty might discourage future investments, slowing down construction and reducing housing supply in the long term. The result could ironically deepen the very crisis the law aims to solve. Beyond its economic implications, the Housing and Land Reform Act stirs emotional and ethical concerns. For many, owning property represents not just wealth, but identity, stability, and generational security. The possibility of losing that through state intervention feels deeply unsettling. Critics emphasize that housing reform should focus on sustainable development, fair taxation, and community partnerships rather than forced redistribution. While the goal of ensuring shelter for all is universally supported, the method proposed by this law feels coercive rather than collaborative. Citizens now question whether social equality should come at the cost of individual ownership and personal freedom. The Act may build homes, but it risks demolishing the trust between the people and the state.
Number 10. The Media Accountability and Misinformation Act. The Media Accountability and Misinformation Act is one of the most polarizing laws passed in the UK in 2025, reshaping how information is shared and consumed. The legislation requires all online publishers, journalists, and even independent content creators to submit their material for government-approved fact-checking before it can be distributed to the public.
Officials claim that purpose is to combat the spread of fake news, conspiracy theories, and digital misinformation that have fueled division and public mistrust in recent years. Supporters argue that this act promotes accuracy and restores integrity in journalism. However, critics see it as a thinly veiled form of censorship, giving authorities the power to decide which narratives are acceptable and which are not. Journalists and digital rights advocates fear that the law will undermine free speech and suppress dissenting opinions. The broad language of the Act makes it possible for controversial or politically sensitive topics to be labeled as misinformation, silencing voices that challenge official narratives. Independent media outlets, which often rely on limited funding and quick reporting, may struggle to survive under the weight of constant scrutiny and compliance costs. The law also extends to influencers and social media users, meaning that even personal opinions expressed online could be flagged or penalized for failing to meet accuracy standards. Such restrictions create a chilling effect, discouraging open dialogue and investigative journalism. Many believe the Act transforms the media from a public watchdog into a controlled communication channel, filtering reality through an institutional lens. The deeper concern is the erosion of public trust in information itself. When every story must pass through a government gatekeeper, audiences begin to question whether what they read is truth or propaganda. Critics warn that this could lead to widespread self-censorship, where individuals choose silence over risk. While combating misinformation is a legitimate goal, the approach taken by this law replaces education and transparency with regulation and control. The Media Accountability and Misinformation Act may aim to protect truth, but in practice it threatens to silence diversity, weaken democracy, and reshape the relationship between citizens and information in ways that could define a new era of controlled communication.
The wave of new UK laws in 2025 has left citizens standing at a crossroads between progress and control. Each act, from digital surveillance to media regulation, claims to create safety, order, or sustainability. Yet, together, they form a picture of a society slowly surrendering its privacy and independence. People fear a future where technology no longer serves humanity but governs it, where security replaces freedom, and where silence feels safer than honesty. These laws reflect a growing tension between innovation and liberty, raising the question of whether convenience and protection are worth the loss of personal autonomy. What makes this shift even more unsettling is how easily control can be disguised as care. The National Digital ID, AI employment, and climate mandates may appear practical, but they also tighten the web of surveillance that defines modern governance. Citizens are beginning to realize that rights once taken for granted, to speak, to protest, to live privately, now hang in delicate balance. This moment is more than a political turning point, it's a test of awareness. Whether society accepts or resists these changes will determine the kind of freedom future generations inherit. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into global policies shaping our lives. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe these laws protect the people or control them? And don't forget to check out our next video exploring how technology is redefining democracy.